Wyoming Territory, October 1879. The wind howled through the Bighorn Basin, carrying dust and the stench of blood. Letty Barnes was already on the ground when the fourth kick landed, square in her ribs. She could barely hear the jeering now, only the dull crack of bone and the warm rush of her own breath leaving her lungs. Her dress, torn at the shoulder, was soaked red down one side. Her hands curled weakly over her head as another boot caught her thigh. "We warned you," a voice spat. "A woman does not run a ranch, especially not with land we want." Letty had not begged when they came. She had not screamed when the first punch landed. But now, lying in the dirt outside her barn, her vision blurred and her cheek pressed against the frost-bitten ground, all she prayed for was that her two boys Owen and Otis were still safe in the crawlspace she had shoved them into before the men stormed through the front door. "Leave her," the leader grunted finally. "She ain't worth killing." Boots crunched in retreat. Her fingers twitched, trying to hold onto consciousness, but the blackness came down hard. It might have been minutes, might have been hours. But then came the thud of hooves, not many, just one horse. The stranger dismounted before the dust had even settled. He did not shout, he did not run. He walked, slow and steady, like he had all the time in the world and not a single doubt in his mind. "Ma'am," his voice was deep, roughened by travel and weather. "Can you hear me?" Letty blinked through swollen eyes. She could barely make out the man kneeling beside her, but she saw the edge of a wide-brimmed hat and the glint of a revolver on his hip. His fingers were careful as he brushed hair from her face. "My name's Roman Nash," he said, voice low and calm. "You're safe now, I promise." She tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. He pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her. "Do not talk, I need to get you inside." Roman lifted her like she weighed nothing, careful not to jostle her broken side. Inside the house, he laid her on the settee and moved with quiet purpose, pulling bandages from his saddlebag, heating water over what was left of the fire, and checking each bruise and break with the practiced hands of a man who had seen too much violence to flinch at it anymore. "Where are your children?" he asked as he worked. Letty managed to move her fingers a little, pointing toward the floorboards behind the hearth. He followed her gaze, then crouched. "Owen, Otis." A soft whimper answered him. Roman pried up the board, and two small boys, dirt-streaked and shaking, looked up at him with tear-stained cheeks. "We ain't gonna hurt you," Roman said gently. "Your mama's alive." "She needs you." The boys crawled out, clinging to each other. Roman scooped them up and carried them to her, letting them tuck themselves beside her on the couch, holding onto her torn dress with tiny fists. Letty wept then. Soundless, shaking tears that soaked her boy's hair. Roman sat near the door, cleaning his rifle in the firelight. He did not ask questions. He waited. By morning, she could speak. "They came 3 days ago," Letty rasped. "Said my husband owed them money. He died last winter. There was no debt. They just wanted the land. Said I could sign it over or they would take it." Roman's jaw tightened. "And you said no." "I said it was mine. I built this place with him. I would not hand it over." He nodded once, slow. "How many were there?" "4, the tall one with the gray coat. He led them." Roman stood. He buckled his gun belt tighter. "Where are you going?" Letty asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To finish it." "You do not need to." "I do," he said. "You are not the first they have hurt, but you will be the last." He found them 2 towns over, drunk and loud in a saloon in Red Rock Crossing. Roman walked in without a word, his boots heavy on the floorboards. The leader looked up, half laughing until Roman's Colt was at his throat. "You beat a woman half to death," Roman said, voice cold. The man tried to reach for his pistol. Roman shot the gun clean from his hand and kicked him to his knees. "Mercy," the man gasped, holding his shattered wrist. Roman pressed the barrel to his forehead. "Say it louder." "Mercy." The whole saloon had gone still. Roman holstered the gun. "You go near her again, and I will not give you the chance to beg next time." He walked out, quiet as he came. When he returned to the ranch, the boys ran to him, not afraid anymore. Letty stood at the porch rail, her face still bruised but her back straight. "You came back," she said. "I said I would." She stepped down, slow, favoring her side. "Why?" "I have seen evil," Roman said. but I have not seen anyone stand against it the way you did. That matters to me." She blinked, surprised. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," his voice softened. "You are strong, you protect what is yours. You love those boys like your own life." Letty looked up at him, her eyes searching. "You stayed with me," she said, "when you could have just left." "I did not want to leave." He reached out, brushed a thumb gently along her cheek, where the bruises had faded to yellow. She leaned into it. Neither of them said anything else. The wind blew through the cottonwoods. The boys laughed somewhere near the barn, and for the first time in days, Letty exhaled without pain. Roman stayed that night, and the next, and the next. The fire burned steady in the hearth. So did something else. The frost held to the fence rails through the morning, thick as wool, and the sky hung low with the weight of coming snow. Roman had risen early, saddle already cinched, but his boots remained beside the kitchen door. Letty stood at the counter, her back to the room, slicing dried apples for the boys' breakfast. Her left hand trembled slightly when she moved, but she didn't ask for help. Roman watched her from the table, his coffee untouched. The boys were outside, their laughter bouncing against the barn wall as they chased the hound pup Roman had brought back with him 2 days before. It had followed him out of Red Rock Crossing, ribs showing and half-starved. Owen had named it Jasper. "I could pay you," Letty said suddenly, her voice even but quiet. "You've been working the north pasture fence. And the tack shed, what you did in there, would have taken me a week." "I don't want your money," Roman answered, keeping his tone gentle. She turned, wiping her hands on a rag. "I'm not looking for charity." "I know that," he stood, resting a hand on the chair back. "You've been surviving long enough without anyone's help. I'm just here if you want me to be." Letty didn't look away. "What are you running from?" Roman blinked once. "Men like you don't wander without reason," she said. He crossed the room and leaned against the doorframe. "I used to ride for the 3rd out of Fort Sanders. After the war, I stayed on, thought I could build something out here. Got mixed up with some men who weren't what they claimed. By the time I saw it clear, it was too late to undo the things I let happen." Letty set the knife down slowly. "You did things you regret." He nodded. "I thought if I just kept moving, maybe I'd leave it behind. But it follows, every morning." She stepped forward, her arms crossed. "You could have kept going." "I didn't want to." Outside, the boys called to each other, their voices echoing through the still air. A dusting of snow had begun to fall, soft and unsure of itself. Roman cleared his throat. "That man, the one in the gray coat, he won't bother you again. His friends scattered fast after what happened. Word's gone out. No one's gonna come sniffing for your land for a while. I'm not naive enough to think they won't come back. Sooner or later, someone always does. Then they'll find you ready, and not alone." Letty studied him. "You mean to stay?" "I've got nowhere better to be." She didn't smile, but something in her shoulders eased. "Well, you'll find winter here is stubborn. We lose cattle to blizzards, and the creek floods come spring. It's not kind country." "I'm not looking for kind." She reached for her shawl and stepped past him toward the porch. "If you're staying, then you might as well see how we cut wood around here. The boys can't haul more than a few limbs at a time." He followed her out, boots crunching over the frozen path. The trees on the far slope had dropped most of their leaves, leaving the hills gray-boned and quiet. Owen ran up with a branch dragging behind him, cheeks red, eyes bright. He stopped short when he saw Roman. "You gonna help us?" he asked, hopeful. "If your ma's letting me, I reckon I will." Otis nodded solemnly. "Mama says we don't take help from folks we don't trust." Roman crouched beside him. "That's good advice." "You trust me." Otis looked at Letty. She didn't speak, but her gaze lingered on Roman for a long moment. "Yes," Otis said at last. Roman stood. "Then let's get to work." They spent the morning dragging, limbs to the pile by the shed. Roman split logs while the boys stacked them in crooked towers. Letty moved back and forth between the house and the yard, keeping watch without hovering. Once, when she passed Roman, her fingers brushed the back of his hand. She didn't flinch. Neither did he. By dusk, the snow had thickened, and the wind had turned sharp. Letty lit the oil lamps while the boys huddled close to the stove, feet bare and steaming from the warmth. Roman sat near the window, sharpening his knife on a whetstone. "Are you any good with horses?" Letty asked. He looked up. "I've worked with them." "Good. I've got a mare that throws her head when you try to bridle her. She needs someone with patience." "I've got that." She watched him for a beat. "You don't strike me as a patient man." "I wasn't," he said. "I'm learning." Letty nodded once and turned away, her braids swinging against her back. The air inside the cabin was warm with wood smoke and stew. Outside, the snow fell harder, swallowing the last of the light. Roman didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. He was staying, and she was letting him. By the third week of snow, the porch steps vanished under a drift, and the barn doors froze in place each morning. Roman took to waking early, hauling water before the sun had a chance to stiffen the pails. Letty had offered him the cot in the loft, but he rarely used it, always the last to bed, first to rise, as though still keeping watch. She didn't question it. One evening, after the boys had fallen asleep with their heads touching in the corner by the stove, Letty sat across from Roman at the table, patching a tear in Otis' mittens. A lantern burned low between them, casting their shadows long against the walls. "You ever think about settling before?" she asked, not looking up from her stitching. "I did once." "What happened?" "The land turned to dust. Cattle died. The woman I was with took what little was left and went east to her sister. I let her go. Figured I'd only bring more ruin if I stayed." Letty pulled the thread tight and set the mittens aside. "You think ruin follows you?" "I used to. Now I don't know." She met his gaze for a long time. "I don't believe in cursed men, just ones who stop trying." Roman let his hand rest lightly on the table, close enough that the edge of his knuckles brushed hers. She didn't move away. The wind picked up against the window pane. The silence between them held steady, warm as coals. "I can't let you keep working for nothing," she said finally. "You've done more than any hired man would." "You looking to hire me?" "No," she said softly. "I'm asking if you want to stay for good." Roman blinked once, slow. "You sure?" "I wouldn't ask otherwise." He nodded. "Then I'll stay." She turned her hand, palm up, and laced her fingers gently through his. They said no more that night. In the days that followed, Roman began teaching Owen how to check hoof rot and Otis how to mend fence wire without slicing his fingers. Letty spent more time in the fields with them, her limp easing as the bruises faded. She didn't speak of what had happened, not to the boys, not to Roman, but she didn't flinch when she passed the barn anymore. On the last Sunday before the thaw, Roman found her in the root cellar, sorting through the last of the potatoes. "You got a dress in that trunk under your bed," he said, his voice low. She glanced up, brow furrowed. "How would you know that?" "I fixed the leg on your bed last week. It was hangin' out the corner." She gave a faint laugh. "It's from before the boys were born. Why?" "There's a dance in town after the thaw. Thought maybe you might want to go, with me." Letty leaned back on her heels. "You dance?" "Not well, but I'd try." She studied him a moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll dust it off." Roman stepped back up into the daylight, boots crunching on the packed snow. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. That night, after the house had gone quiet, Letty brushed her fingers across the old trunk. The dress inside was faded blue calico, creased from disuse but whole. She held it to her chest and closed her eyes. The past had taken much, but not everything, and for the first time in years she let herself hope for more. The thaw came slowly, dragging its heels through late March. The last of the snow sank into the earth, leaving behind a patchwork of mud and frostbitten grass. Letty stood at the edge of the field, knuckles resting lightly on her hips, eyes on the hills where green had just begun to show. Roman was farther out, sleeves rolled, coaxing a reluctant plow horse into motion. The boys were chasing each other between the furrows, their boots caked in wet soil and their laughter high in the warming air. Letty had not worn the blue dress yet, though she had taken to letting her hair down after supper, brushing it out by the hearth while Roman read from the thick book he had traded for in town, some volume of stories from the coast, strange and vivid tales the boys half understood, but never tired of hearing. That evening, as dusk slid across the land, Letty ladled stew into 4 bowls and set them on the table. Roman entered last, wiping his hands on a rag, the scent of horse and sweat still clinging to him. He took his usual seat but paused before reaching for a spoon. "Got a letter at the post," he said. "Came down with the trader from Cody." Letty looked up from her bowl. "For you." "No return mark, just my name. But it's not from anyone I know." She set her spoon down. "You gonna open it?" He nodded. "Already did." The boys looked between them. Owen leaned forward, eyes wide. "Was it bad?" Roman gave a small shake of his head. "Not bad. Just unexpected. It was from a man I rode with out of Fort Sanders. Said the one who led that crew, the ones who came here, he'd been wanted for a while. Turns out there's a bounty now. Said if I give a statement, they'll close the case and offer a reward." Letty's mouth pressed into a thin line. "You thinking of riding in?" "I'm thinking it might be time to stop running from the things I've done by pretending I'm not still part of them." "You'd be gone how long?" 4 days there. Maybe 5 back if the pass holds dry." She nodded once, "Then go." Roman looked at her carefully. "You sure? This land doesn't go quiet just because you're not on it. I've managed before." He didn't argue. That night after the boys had gone to sleep, she brought out the dress and laid it across the back of the chair. Roman stood by the door, cinching his saddlebag. "I want you back," she said plainly. "I'll come back," he answered. She crossed the room and put her hand to his chest, just above the collarbone. He covered it with his own. "You don't owe the world your whole self just because it took pieces," she said. "I know," he said. She leaned up and kissed him, slow, certain, no hesitation in it. When she stepped back, her hand lingered at the edge of his coat. "Be safe," she said. "Always." He left before dawn. The boys didn't wake. Letty watched from the porch as he disappeared over the rise, the silhouette of his horse just visible against the pale morning. 3 days passed, then 4. On the 5th, it rained cold and steady, soaking the fields and leaving the chickens ankle-deep in mud. Letty worked with her jaw tight, her sleeves rolled and her hair tied back with twine. Each time the wind blew, she looked east. On the 7th day, near sundown, the dog barked and bolted toward the fence line. Letty stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her skirt. Roman rode in with his hat low and his coat dark from travel. The boys ran to him, and he dismounted with a tired grin, lifting Otis into one arm and clapping Owen's shoulder with the other. "You took longer than you said," Letty called. "Had to wait out a washout near the canyon, got stuck behind a broken axle." She walked toward him, slow and steady. He met her halfway and set Otis down. The boys darted back toward the porch, already shouting about supper. Roman looked at Letty, eyes lined from the trail but clear. "They offered the reward," he said. "I didn't take it." "Why not?" "Didn't feel like it was mine to collect. That man didn't owe me anything." She reached for his hand, and the statement. "I gave it, told them what happened, told them what you did." Letty's brow lifted. "I said you didn't give up what was yours, and that if anyone ever came back, they wouldn't find you alone." He squeezed her hand gently. "The sheriff said you ought to come in sometime, said the town remembers what you stood against." "I don't need their memory." She looked past him toward the field. "I've got this place." Roman leaned in, resting his forehead lightly against hers. "And me," he said. She closed her eyes. "And you." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet earth and the distant bloom of wild onions. Roman brushed a thumb just beneath her jaw. She turned into his palm. He didn't ask again if he could stay. He didn't need to. The spring sun settled low across the pasture, casting long gold along the hills and catching in the high grass where new calves wobbled on unsteady legs. Letty stood near the fence with a length of rope looped over her shoulder, watching Roman lead the roan colt out from the corral. The colt reared once, nervous, but Roman's hand stayed even, his voice low and steady as he moved alongside. "He's still green," Letty said, her eyes following the colt's skittish steps. "He'll settle," Roman replied, not looking away. "Just needs someone who doesn't give up on him." The words settled between them. Letty glanced toward the shed where Owen was hauling feed, Otis trailing behind with a wooden pail twice the size of his arm. Jasper circled them both, barking once, then darting toward a squirrel in the brush. "I got a letter myself," Letty said after a pause. Roman straightened, the colt shifting beside him. "From who?" "My sister lives outside Wichita. I haven't heard from her in 8 years. Not since before Otis could walk." Roman let the rope slacken between his fingers. "She all right?" "She wants me to come visit, bring the boys. Says she's got room now after her husband passed. She's got a schoolhouse nearby, and she thought the boys might like a chance to be around more children." "Do you want to go?" Letty looked down at her hands. "I don't know. I haven't left this land in over a decade. Even when we had to ride into town, I kept my eyes on the road." Roman stepped closer. "You wouldn't be leaving it behind, not unless you meant to." "I don't," she said firmly, "but I think I might go for a few weeks. Let the boys see something different. Let myself breathe a different kind of air. Would you be here when I got back?" "I would be waiting on the porch." She met his gaze. "I want you to come. But I won't ask you to." "I'll come," Roman said without hesitation. "Not because I don't love this land, but because I love you more." Letty didn't answer with words. She crossed the space between them and placed her hand on his chest, just above the place where his heart beat slow and steady beneath his shirt. He leaned down, his forehead brushing hers. They left 2 days later. Letty packed the trunk slowly, folding dresses and quilts with care. Roman rolled the boys' bedrolls and strapped them to the wagon, checking the axle twice, then once more before they set off. The cabin door was latched behind them, shutters drawn, the stove cleaned out. Nothing forgotten, nothing rushed. The road east was long, but not hard. The boys dozed against each other in the back of the wagon, and Letty sat beside Roman, one hand resting over his on the reins. They passed through pine-covered hills, through towns with church bells and dry goods shops, through fields where wildflowers unfurled bright beneath the warming sun. At her sister's homestead, the welcome was quiet but warm. The boys were shy at first, but the sight of a swing hanging from a cottonwood limb loosened their shoulders. Letty's sister, Clara, stood with gray in her braid and a soft way of speaking. She didn't ask about the bruises or the missing years. She only touched Letty's arm and said, "You look stronger than I remember." They stayed for 12 days. The schoolhouse was small but kind. The teacher gave Otis a slate to write his name, and Owen learned to measure with beans. Letty spent the evenings on the porch with Roman, watching the sun drop behind the prairie while Clara hummed inside, some old song from their childhood neither of them fully remembered. On the 13th morning, Letty packed their things without hesitation. Roman hitched the horses before she asked. The boys waved goodbye without tears. Back at the ranch, the grass had thickened and the creek ran full. Letty stepped from the wagon and looked across the land that had nearly been taken from her. She saw the barn, the fields, the porch steps worn smooth. Roman took her hand. "I think we've got enough saved to build on the south side," he said. "Room for a second bedroom, maybe a small washroom." Letty nodded slowly, and a porch wide enough for a rocking bench. "Already planned it that way. They built it that summer." Roman worked the frame with Owen watching close, Otis helping his mother hang fresh curtains in the window that faced the hills. Letty planted a line of sweet peas along the fence, and Roman set a horseshoe above the new door. The porch held through the first storm. So did they. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the barn, Roman pulled a small ring from his pocket. Forged silver, plain but strong. He didn't say a word when he offered it. Letty didn't ask for one. She took it and slid it on, her hand warm in his. They married with the boys holding wildflowers and Clara standing close. No preacher, just quiet vows beneath the cottonwood and the land bearing witness. They didn't need more than that. Years passed. The boys grew tall, their boots leaving deeper tracks with each turn of season. Jasper grew gray around the muzzle and slept near the hearth. Letty's hair thinned and Roman's hands stiffened come winter, but their mornings never changed. He rose first. She followed. They worked side by side. They never left the ranch again. They didn't have to. Because peace had found them, not in the silence of forgetting, but in the steady light of choosing each day, each other, this life. And that was enough. Forever.